Alrighty, welcome back. So we're going to talk about IP address classes. There's class A, class B, class C. There are more classes, but nobody really cares about those. So we're just going to talk about class A, B, and C. So class A is the largest network, but the smallest number, if that makes any sense. So I'll just go ahead and show you. So 1.0.0.0, that is a class A IP address. So lowest number, but largest amount of addresses available, because now you in each subnet you can go 2.0.0.0 and 3.0.0.0, and you've got tons of addresses available in each of these octets now. Because you could go, let's just scribble these out real quick. You could go 1.1.1.1, and these ones right here can go all the way up to 255 each. So then you could have 1.2.1.1, and each of these ones could go up to 255. Then you could have 1.3.1.1, and each of these can go to 255. So you see how it scales exponentially. So a Class A network is absolutely massive. And most of the time in your routing and switching experience, you are not going to be dealing with a Class A network. But anyways, the range is 1.0.0.0 all the way to 126.0.0.0. That is the Class A address range. Class B address range starts at 128.0.0.0. And then it goes all the way to 191.255.0.0. Class C address range, this is the most common. It's really small subnets, really small networks, and it's typically what you'll find in small businesses, medium businesses, and homes. And that is going to be 192.0.0.0 all the way to 223.255.255.0. So everything between these ranges right here fall under their specific class. So if you find any IP address that looks like, let's say, 45.1.6.22, well, that falls between this range right here. So that's a Class A address. If you look at your home router and it says something like 192.168, that's not a 1, 168.2.252, that falls between this range right here. So that means that it is going to be a Class C address. Now, in IP addressing, there are two main categories other than classes that are very important, and that is private addresses and public addresses. So the easiest way to think about it is private addresses. Those are all the addresses that are only ever going to be given out to a private entity within their LAN, their local area network. So let's go off of your house, because that's probably what most people have the most experience with when it comes to IP addresses, is what address is their computer or their home router or their tablet on their network or something like that. So 192.168.2.25 whatever is pretty common inside of your home. That is a Class C address, but that is also a private address. There are two other address ranges that are private addresses, and there's one address range for private addresses in every single class. So starting at Class A, you've got 10.0.0.0 all the way to 10.255.255.255. So this entire block right here will only ever be assigned inside of a private network, whether it's a business, let's say ExxonMobil, or I don't know, PayPal, something like that. Within their network, they will probably have something like that. The reason they would use a Class A is because they've got so many devices, they've got to have enough addresses to be able to cover all of those devices, because if you run out of addresses, you can no longer put devices on your network, and that will cause a massive headache for all the network engineers that are out there. Somebody will probably get fired because they're too stupid to make their network large enough in the first place. So that is why big companies will use Class A networks. Class B networks, I actually very rarely ever see Class B networks used in the wild. In public addressing, yes, but we haven't gotten to that yet. Private addressing, I rarely ever see Class B networks used because it's typically like Class C, the 192 dot whatever, that kind of covers all of your needs. Or if you need more than that, you're probably going to have to go to a Class A, and Class B is just kind of like the redheaded stepchild that nobody ever really uses. But it is used. So we'll go ahead and cover what that is. So that is 172.16.0.0 all the way to 172.31.255.255. So I bet you right now, if you are watching this video for a class, you're probably thinking, oh, good Lord, I have to memorize all this. And unfortunately, yes, you do. Because they want to know it on the tests, but I promise you, it's not going to be that important in your everyday life, because it's not going to be that important to memorize, because you're just going to be able to Google it. I find myself not remembering some of these classes, some of these ranges every once in a while. Like, for instance, 172.16, I remember that, but I can't ever remember where it ends. I don't remember that it ends at 172.31.255. It's just kind of hard to remember, but you just got to memorize it to pass your tests, and then just know that when you get into the real world, you can just Google it. It's really easy to just Google private network address range. So anyways, then over here on the Class C networks, we got 192.168.0.0 all the way to, see if I can draw my crappy little arrow right here, all the way to 192.168.255.255. That right there is your private address range for each class network. So if you need a very large private address range, you're going to use this 10 dot whatever. So like I said, big companies like General Electric or something like that, they're going to be using Class A networks. They are rarely going to be using Class C networks unless they have some specialized environment where they've got a really small network that they need to handle that's routed separately from everything else. Then Class Bs, medium-sized businesses might use them. I rarely see them used out in the wild, but it's still possible, and there's nothing wrong with using a Class B. And then Class C right over here, this is the most common one that I'm used to seeing. That's what you're going to see in your home or your small business, or if you go to Best Buy and just buy some really crappy routers and plug them all in, they're probably going to default to the 192.168 subnet or range. So what is the difference between private address and public address? All right, so let's say, go ahead and go onto your computer and go to whatismyip.com. Or I think it's something like that. You could just go to Google and just type in what is my IP, and I think Google will tell you. It'll probably be something weird like 23.67.5.2 or something weird like that, and you're going to be like, I've never seen that address in my life. And that's because that is a public address. Those addresses are actually purchased by large companies, mainly internet service providers, and nobody else is allowed to use those addresses. So if I go get a subscription with AT&T for my home internet, I'm given one IP address. This actually kind of blew my mind when I first learned about this. I was given one IP address, but yet I could have multiple devices on my network. It's because we use a technology called NAT, Network Address Translation, which I am not getting into in this video. And basically it translates your address from that weird one that's like 62.2.7. whatever. It translates it from that one into your home address that's more familiar to you, that's 192.168.2. whatever. So that is how a company like AT&T can give you one IP address for your entire home or your entire business, but yet you can still have hundreds of devices in your network. Okay, so when those geniuses out there came up with the IP addressing scheme decades ago, they realized that they were going to have to separate them out into different categories so that we wouldn't run out of IP addresses at some point. I don't think they realized how many IP addresses we'd be using, but Anyways, usable IP addresses, we've actually run out. We don't have any spare IP addresses out there in the world anymore. They've all been purchased by somebody. They've been claimed by somebody, and that's all those public addresses. So that is why we have private addresses, so that no matter how many or how few available public IP addresses we have, we can still continue to add more and more devices onto our networks without ever running out of IP addresses. So different companies will purchase different blocks of public IP addresses. Let's say AT&T, they're probably going to have a lot of Class A addresses, Class B addresses, and probably even some Class C addresses. They own a crap load of addresses because they are one of the largest internet service providers in the world. Now, little local companies like, I don't know if you've ever heard of NTS Communications, or maybe Grande if you're in the Central Texas area, or Windstream if you're out in the rural areas. Those companies, they're really small. They will probably have some addresses, but not nearly as many as compared to Comcast or Time Warner or AT&T or something like that. So they have to be conservative with those addresses. They will give each customer one address, or if you want to pay for more, then you can pay probably $15 a month just to have another address available to you. But anyways, every time you access a website, no matter what device you're using inside of your home, it is always going to the website will always see it as the same IP address. It's kind of weird, but you'll have to remember there's another process going on in the background that you might not know of yet, and that's called NAT, Network Address Translation, that is going on to allow all of those different IP addresses that you see in your home to actually merge together and go out into the big world with one IP address. So because we have one address per household, typically, that's why you see a bunch of Twitch streamers and stuff like that that do not want to let anybody know what their IP address is. So if they ever go to what is my IP or do a speed test or something on their stream, they will blur it out, or they should blur it out, because if you're able to see that one IP address, then that means that people are able to find you on the internet, and they can do things like DDoS, which is direct denial of service, basically throwing so many packets of information at your computer at once that it just dies. So a public IP address is something that you want to keep private to yourself. You don't want to tell people what it is.